All right. Well, welcome again to another one of our live events. And I got to tell you, I'm excited about this one today. Brian killed it last week on one talking about stop overthinking, just pick up the phone. And this is kind of a similar message as it relates to communication. And my friend Ryan Dearbone, one of our trainers, Ryan, I don't know that there's a bigger mistake in, I don't care if it's, you know, clients, teams, family, friends, but communication or that lack thereof seems to always be an issue. Is that fair?
Oh, oh, absolutely. I think the biggest thing we find is that we think that we are great communicators, that there's nothing to learn in communication, that sometimes it's a one size fits all type deal. I've got a friend of mine. He's in a higher position, and he'll talk to me like, well, we're communicators, so we know what's going on. Yes, but we don't, because if we knew what was going on, we wouldn't have to improve on our communication all the time. So I think people are definitely we, we tend to we tend to overestimate our own communication abilities.
Spending much of my career in the broadcast space, I would often say I'm in the communication business, and we are terrible communicators sometimes. But
Mhm.
it's something that we all need to work on. That we know, and I think most of us recognize that we can improve. And so I'm excited about today. So Ryan, tell you what, I'm going to go off camera. I'm going to turn it over to you, let you drive, and I'll jump in as we go and throw some questions your way. By the way, the chat is open, so you can go to our chat, throw any questions to us, to Ryan, as we go through our day. And we'll, in spending a few minutes with each of you today, we'll take some questions as we get to the end. All right, Ryan, it's yours, brother. Appreciate it.
All right. So, the first groundwork I think we need to lay, and I think this is probably one of the most important things about communication, is a lot of times we will blame miscommunication, missed communication, whatever, on somebody else, on the person that we are talking to, the audience that we're communicating with. We often, as communicators, don't want to take it on ourselves. We want to say, "Oh, well, they didn't hear what I'm saying, or they didn't understand it the way I meant it." And so that's for us an easy, clear get out of jail free card, because it's like, I there's no way I could have misspoke. There's no way I could have missed an opportunity to communicate or communicate in a certain way. So that's the first thing that we end up doing. That's one of the things that, to me, in communication is a cardinal sin, because we put the onus on somebody else. When a lot of times when it comes to communication, we need to look at ourselves. How are we communicating? What are the things that we are not doing or not saying, or saying in an incorrect way? So obviously, we communicate from the time we wake up to the time we go to sleep. Most of the times, people don't realize it, but 50% of all communication is listening or hearing. So that's the first thing we need to be aware of, the fact that if you are not listening or hearing the person or the people that you're communicating with, you're not going to be an effective communicator. Now, with that being said, as a communicator, we need to expect that the person or the people that we're talking to do not understand what we're trying to say and the way we're trying to say it. So, in my job as a college professor, I'm trying to communicate to students on a daily basis how to be better journalists, how to be good journalists. 9 times out of 10, out of a 1.5 hour lecture, they're probably going to pick up 5 minutes worth of the information that I presented to them. Now, does that mean that I'm a bad communicator? Possibly. Does it mean that they're not paying attention? If you've been around college kids, that's a very strong likelihood. But also, that means I have to be understanding that my communication skills need to be better. So if I can up it from 5 minutes worth of good content that they've taken in to maybe 10 minutes, because I'm communicating differently. College students versus dealing with people in the business sector. So when I'm working with people, obviously me and Darren are men of a certain age. So we have different types of conversations if we're going to communicate, because we know things that college kids don't. Even going back to your family. So talking to my wife, talking to my daughters, my communication style has to change for them. Communication is not a one size fits all. I can't tell you how many times that me and my wife have had conversations. And so I'm very much a creative communicator, a nuanced communicator. She's black and white. Tell it to me as it is. She thinks with that type of her brain. So even a couple days ago, I was explaining to her how a convention I was at, how it worked in terms of how the process of electing officers worked. To me, it was pretty simple that you cast a ballot. If there was some discussion, if there was some queries, if there was some this and that, we would step out of the open session, go into a closed session, and from there work our way back in and vote. My wife, having never been in that circumstance or that situation, didn't understand it. So she kept asking for specific details, details that in my head should have seemed natural, should have seemed like, okay, you should know this. I mean, why have to go into detail? And the way my brain works, I'm thinking, it's going to take more for me to retrain my brain to think about, okay, what exactly led to that? I know what happened. You should too. That's a mistake on me as a communicator. I need to go in thinking that she doesn't know anything about the processes, about the circumstances, about even the environment. When I start thinking in those terms, I can give her all the detail that she needs. So when we're communicating, especially in our job, uh, I talked about this in one of the previous sessions. There's missed communication and miscommunication. So missed communication, that's an opportunity missed. That's communication that does not get to the person that you think it will. So in communication, we're always looking for what is the best channel. How do we get information to a lot of people? So if you're somebody who doesn't like to communicate one-on-one, face-to-face, you may opt for email. Nothing wrong with email. But 9 times out of 10, people are going to miss emails. It may go to their spam email address, well, to their spam folder. It may go to, um, it may end up in a something where they see an email, but then they pass right through it. It may be that you think, okay, well, I'm going to text somebody something because I don't necessarily want to face to face talk to them, or I don't have time to face talk with them, which is fine. But what's being missed in that communication? Because if they're getting a lot of text or if they turn their phone off, it's 11 o'clock. What if I text somebody at 11 o'clock, but they don't get back to me until 6 o'clock and I need to know what's going on right now? I need pertinent information right now to make a decision, to pursue something, to get something done. That's missed communication because my assumption is that somebody's waiting at their phone to answer my question. They don't have anything else to do in their life, but they're waiting for my communication. And when that happens, that's missed communication. So, miscommunication is when you say something the way you thought you said it, but what I get from it is different. So, if I tell Darren, your shirt looks great, but it would be better with the suit coat. Miscommunication is I'm saying that's a good looking shirt. It would look great with the suit coat. He may not hear. He may say, "What's he trying to say to me? What's he trying to communicate to me?" Which creates a whole bigger can of worms.
Um, I love the missed communication. And I had someone recently ask me, said, is there what's proper in how long to return a phone call and how long to respond to an email? And their position was I should respond to the phone call quicker than the email. It's okay if it's a couple of days. And I thought, okay, that's going to create miscommunication issues. Any
Yep.
thoughts on that?
Hopefully, whoever you're talking to, you have enough of a relationship to know kind of what works best for them. To me, it's a priority thing. If you get a phone call before you get an email, I would follow up with the phone call because you just never know how urgent that phone call is. Now, if they say, "Hey, look, this is not a big deal," they leave you a voicemail, say, "Not a big deal, get to me when you can." That gives you a little bit of leeway. An email, generally, you don't get that type of communication. An email is sent, and unless they put like an urgent stamp on it, you don't know how quickly somebody needs to be responded to. So in my head, what I always try to do, and as a communicator, I'm bad about this. In the order that I receive it, like you get the phone, you're on the phone, and they say, you will be responded to in the order that we receive your call. The same type of deal. In the order that we get your information, or as you reach out to me, I'm going to try to respond back to you because I don't know. on the other side of that email or that phone call, just what you have going and really how important that information is to you at this moment.
I'll share this and I'll jump off camera again, but I thought that was it. You, you kind of triggered that with me, is that in many cases we think we're the only ones who are busy.
Yep.
We're not fair to everybody else, that everybody's as busy as we are, and we expect people to get back with us immediately, and we give ourselves grace and that it can take a little longer, and we probably all need to do better with that. I'll jump off screen again.
Oh, absolutely. And but that goes to another point of communication. A lot of times we think communication is transactional. So transactional communication is when you're at let's say you're at the grocery store, you're buying something, you hand the cashier money or you hand the cashier your card. They swipe it, they give you your groceries. That's transactional. That's transactional communication. And a lot of times that's what we mistake our communication for. We think, oh, we're doing, actual real emotional communication when we're actually just doing transactional communication. I speak or I email you, I text you with the thought that you are going to respond back to me because I'm the reason for this conversation. I'm the lead dog. I'm not taking into account that you may have something going on. There's been times where I've called somebody or I've emailed somebody. Actually, last week I was uh, reaching out to a gentleman. He does a lot of work for our church. He does a lot of work with our media ministry. And so I was reaching out to him to find out when he was going to come install some new mics. So this was on Monday. I didn't hear back from him until Wednesday. I texted him again, just, hey, quick, just want to see if you're going to be able to come this week so I can let some other people know. And he said, sorry, my back has went out. So I've been basically doing rehab for the past few days, taking it real easy. So in my head, my situation was quick enough. I needed an answer. I need an answer. This man is convalescing because his back went out. What I was doing was transactional. I didn't reach out and say, "Hey, how are you doing? Hope all is well." When you get a chance to reach out to me because I have a question for you. I was going in with the mindset of I need to know an answer so I can tell all these people that are, waiting on me for an answer what's going on, what's good. When we deal in transactional communication, we miss a lot because when you're sitting, so for example, a couple weeks ago, I was in Phoenix, Arizona. So I didn't have a car, didn't rent a car. So I'm taking Ubers. I tried a driverless car. For the first time ever, a driverless car driving around Phoenix downtown. The cool thing about it was if you don't want to have to talk to anybody in that vehicle, there's nobody to talk to. It's you by yourself, and the computer is driving the car. A lot of times that's the way we want to be when we're communicators. We don't want to have somebody sitting in the driver's seat. We don't want to have somebody sitting behind us in the back seat. We want to be in an island unto ourselves. But when we do that, we want to also expect that somebody else is going to be willing to just, hey, I want to hear from you. We are not the end all be all. One thing that we end up finding, and this comes out in crisis communication, because it's almost like communicating during war and peace. If we're not good communicators during peace times, when things are going smooth, when you're in your office, if you can't communicate with your colleagues and your coworkers and your bosses and the people around you when things are going smooth, how in the world are you going to communicate with them when there's a crisis going on? Especially when that crisis is not just internal, but it goes external. Let's say, for example, the company you work for, there is a recall of a product and it's a big recall. So it's on the news, everybody's hearing about it. You all have to put out a statement. You all have to correct whatever issue it is and make sure that the community, make sure that the customers, the clients know A, your commitment to safety and quality. B, how did this happen? C, we're going to fix this. Who's going to make that statement? Who's going to be the one to communicate that from the top down? Or if there's an issue that was ground up, who's going to make that communication? Who's going to make sure all the employees know? Hey, here's what went wrong. Here's what we're doing to fix it. Here's why you need to, as you're going through and people are asking you questions or coming at you about your job, here's why you need to be in the know. We're not always good about that. crisis communication exposes a lot of people and a lot of companies for lack of communication skills. A lot of times people will go in there, they'll try to do a quick fix, and it ends up making it worse because they're not taking the time to actually listen to the consumer, listen to the clients, listen to the colleagues. I've seen times where people have had really good ideas on how to manage crisis communication, how to get the proper messaging out, how to do more than just send out a press release, but literally go out one on one into the community to talk to people or send out follow up messaging. But because it's such transactional work, they said, oh, a press release will be fine. And then when it blows up even worse because it seems like you just don't care, that creates a bigger issue. And a lot of times that companies can't come out of that. They can't come out of that hole because they now look like a company that doesn't care about the consumer.
So I got a question as you're talking about this, and I thought, okay, I'm just going to jump in right here. Uh, it, I think this happens a lot of places, and this is a good question, but it's not an easy one. It said it feels like the majority of the issues we have in my at my work is when my boss is just sending emails to people in the very building where we're all sitting. And how how can I help improve this for us? So listen,
Yeah.
not the only time this is happening, but we get comfortable behind screens
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
behind email, Ryan. So can you talk about that just a little bit in this world of transactional and
Yeah.
crisis and listen, it wasn't stated in that message of if it where it was. I feels like it's probably just transactional. It's everyday
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
but communication becomes an issue when we're just relying on emails in a very building that we are with these people instead of going having a conversation. Can you talk
Absolutely.
about that a little bit?
I think that create there's a relationship level that's missing. So when this person is getting just emails, where's the relationship at? So when something does fall apart, how are you going to be able to make that connection? So if I'm this person, obviously I don't know if there's a team of like there's a communication team there, if it's how big this organization is and what the scale of it is. But what I would say for me, I would shoot an email to the
It's clearly more than just one person because it says
Mhm.
emailing us.
Yeah.
So
So I would reach out to the boss and just say, I appreciate all the emails keeping us in the loop of what's going on. However, it might be helpful for maybe a face-to-face meeting with us, whether it's a quarterly meeting, something like that. So, A, we can see you, we can establish a relationship with you, and we don't feel like everything is just an email. Now, the bigger scale of the company, the harder that is a lot of times because the leader is so far, they're external facing or they're too busy to meet with the staff. So that's not always going to happen. If you're a smaller shop, you can make that a request and it can be honored a little bit easier. But a lot of times, if you don't see somebody, like if I'm only emailing you, Darren, and just saying, hey, Darren, I need this from you. Hey, Darren, can you do this for me? Hey, Darren, here's what's going on within the company. And we thought you should know about it. But I never lay eyes on you. I've never had a phone conversation with you. It makes it hard for me as an employee to carry out the task. It makes it hard for me to really be able to go out there and say, "Hey, this is what we do, and this is why you should be a part of us." It's transactional communication, and it begats more transactional communication. As a worker, I'm going to go out and be transactional with the clients. I'm going to be transactional with my coworkers because that's what's being fed to me, and that's all I know how to do. So if as much as you can, and even if it's not the top dog, the boss, if there's somebody within the boss's team that can take on that role of being the liaison, the communicator within, and maybe the boss continues to send out emails, but this person comes and puts the personal touch to those emails. That works too because you're getting buy-in. Communication's about buying into the conversation, to the communication. If you don't have buy-in, it is transactional and it'll go right past
and
everybody.
and it's much more difficult to build a relationship with anyone by email than it is face to face and in person. So I thought it
Yeah.
was a great question. I want to throw it at you. I don't want to derail you there, so I'll let you keep rolling.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
And with that, one of the things we're seeing now with text messaging, with AI, with all the others, to where you don't have to communicate. We're looking now, staring at the barrel of having relationship. Well, I don't even want to say relationship, having communication where you never meet somebody, where you never have any type of communication. So I tell this story to people all the time. It's where communication can work. It's kind of a different vein, but communication can work. So back in college, 20 plus years ago, I had a friend. She played World of Warcraft all the time. So obviously with the headphones on, you're playing a video game, but you're able to talk to other people from all over without ever having to meet them. All you do is you play the game, you can talk to them, but you never have any face-to-face interaction. So she starts playing World of Warcraft with this guy who lives in Texas. And so over the course of playing World of Warcraft, they strike up a conversation, strike up a relationship to the point where they fall in love over the communication from their headsets playing a video game. She ends up moving down to Texas to be with him. They get married and they still are together. And this has been at least 20 years because what was transactional communication from a video game turned into a relational conversation. And from there, they were able to figure out that they actually had things in common. They actually liked each other. And Kentucky is where we're at, Texas. So if they can find a communication base simply over headphones, states away, thousands of miles away. How come we can't communicate with people that are right next to us, people that are literally sitting in the cubicle next to us, people that we go out and have conversations with every day? It's not just, and here's one thing I've learned, and obviously I'm still learning. If you can't communicate, have conversations with the people in your own house, how are you going to communicate with people outside of your house? If me and my wife can't communicate, it may not always be perfect, but if we can't communicate, how am I going to communicate with my students? How am I going to communicate with my bosses, with the other people I work with? If I can't learn how to connect with and communicate with my daughters, who are in a totally different generation than me, that understand things differently, if I can't learn how to tailor my communication to them, how am I going to be able to go out and tailor my communication to people in other parts of the country? When I go to a conference or a convention, how am I going to talk to them? How am I going to talk to somebody who doesn't know anything about Kentucky? How am I going to have relational conversations with them? Because at the end of the day, the point of communication is to get everybody on board, to get everybody thinking about how that we can all win. If I'm trying to start a business, if I'm trying to keep a business going, if I'm trying to grow a business, I have to communicate. We tell students all the time, it's great to be able to, if you're a computer science person, you may not have to be a front facing person and going out and communicating with people all the time. You may not have to be out there where people see your face, but you have to be able to communicate to get the job. When you're sitting there at the desk with your potential employers and they ask you questions, if you can't communicate and sell yourself, they're not going to give you a job, no matter how good you are at computer analytics and coding. You've got to be able to communicate and sell why, yes, I'm outstanding at that, but I'm also great at communicating to you my ability, how good I am at this, why you need to hire me because I'm not just a one trick pony. If you're not able to do that, Lord knows we can hire somebody else who is better than that and better at that. So communication is something you're going to do no matter what. So again, if you can't communicate within your own circles, your own household, your own uh, comfort circles, circles of people that you know that you can say anything to, and they're going to probably understand it, or they're going to understand it enough to get along. How are you going to go out and communicate with people who don't know you, who don't understand what you're trying to convey and communicate? Is communication a perfect science? Absolutely not. Is it easy? Absolutely not. But when you do it well, you're never going to do it perfect, but when you do it well, the fruits just grow. So, Darren, as a communicator, and like you said, you've made money in the business. I have as well. as a communicator when you miss the mark. We tend to know pretty easy. Oh, I missed the mark on that because I didn't do this in a certain way or within a certain time frame. We can pick up on that.
You said earlier that 50% of communication is listening. And I find that I'm such a terrible listener. And to your point, we pick up on these things. If you ask me a question and I'm not paying attention, it sends the message to you that something else is distracting me. You know, the latest thing that I saw is that we all experience 6 to 10 distractions an hour. And so
Mhm.
if we're in a conversation and I'm trying to communicate with you, Ryan, and you ask me a question, but I'm distracted, whether it's my Apple Watch or something else going on, it's just sending the message to you that you're not that important, or the question you asked me is not that important. And so listening, guys, is so critical to the whole communication process. And I think by and large, because we're all so distracted, Ryan, it's where a big breakdown comes, especially in that, well, I started to say employer-employee relationship.
Yeah.
It's probably more you and your spouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I'm you're to your point of, you, if you can't communicate with your inner circle, you're not going to communicate otherwise. If I can't communicate with my wife, I'm probably not going to go out a public setting and communicate very well.
Yeah, and if you are, then that says something, because, like, for example, people are watching this right now. They're listening to it, but are they really listening to it? Are they multitasking? They're picking up nuggets? They're picking up pieces of it, but how much are they actually getting? Because distraction. Because maybe you're taking, like, I can hear Peppa Pig in the background. Is that going to distract me? Maybe, maybe not. But either way, I look out my window. I saw somebody pull up to the house next door, pulling something out. My eyes went over there. So I'm still talking, I'm still engaging, I'm still communicating. But if something is distracting me, does that affect what I'm saying? Because I lose train of thought or I move on to something else too quickly.
And in the workplace, the the 6 to 10 distractions an hour. And when you think about it, now, I hope I'm getting the numbers right. I believe it's after a distraction or after you're interrupted at work, it takes you 23 minutes to get your mind back on track to where you were. So now think about the 6 to 10 distractions. And now, after a distraction, after you're interrupted, if it takes 23 minutes, then now you go back to that hour and a half class, hour and a half class that you teach. Your
Mhm.
students, maybe they're fully engaged for 5 minutes. Now take that to a conversation that's 5 minutes. If you put the same percentages to it, then we can see why we're all struggling to communicate, because we're only listening. Such I say listening. I guess there's listening and there's being fully engaged.
Yes.
Um, but if we can all become better listeners, then we got a chance to communicate better, because at least we're hearing and not just waiting to respond.
Absolutely, and I think that's a critical piece. If you're just waiting to respond, this transactional, that's not communication. Anybody can do that. It takes a special level of engagement and understanding to be able to truly communicate.
I had a business, a client this morning that called me. We're having a conversation, and it was that they were talking about some updates, some upgrades that they wanted to do with their business, but it was all talked about in the context of they were struggling with their culture, and part of the struggling with the culture came back to communication was something that they recognize that they need to improve on. So when you think about running a business, almost everything will funnel to your ability to communicate. If you're a salesperson, it's funneling your ability to communicate with that client to earn their trust. And Ryan, I think you'll agree uh, that I know your wife and you know mine, and if we're not listening, it doesn't help the communication very well. So I think a lot
Yeah.
of it starts there.
Oh, absolutely. And I think, especially, like, for example, my pastor, he'll talk about the vision that has been laid upon him. He sees his vision. If he can't share it with me or the rest of the congregation in a way that's understandable for us, because I mean, that's high level stuff. So sometimes it's breaking it down to where we understand, simplify it to me, not saying dumb it down, but simplify it to me to where I understand, at least I understand enough to be able to help you push your vision out. And that's what any business owner, leader is going to have to do. You're going to have to, you have high level thoughts. How do I put that in perspective for somebody who doesn't see it the way I see it or understand it the way I understand it. If I can get that information to you, if I can make it plain and clear, now we've got a conversation. Now you can engage me with, okay, I see what you're saying. How can I be of help? How can I make it work? So going back to the question that the person had earlier, if they can't see the vision, they can't be helpful in order to make it work.
Here's a good question that just came in the chat. When I speak, do I focus more? Wait, hold on. When I speak, do I focus more on what I want to say or on what the other person needs to hear? Those are two different things, and that's a tricky one.
Very much
When I
so.
speak, do I focus more on what I want to say or on what the other person needs to hear? And the reality is, what the other person needs to hear and what you want to say may not be the same.
Absolutely. It depends on the situation. Cause I mean, if I'm as a boss trying to tell you that you did not do enough to make this project work, I need you to hear that. Here's the reasons why the things that you did not were subpar, did not work in order to make this project work. In terms of what they want to hear, maybe it's tone, maybe it's the way I say it, and that's when we go back to maybe that's a one-on-one conversation. An email doesn't do it. An email can be taken 1,000 different ways. I can get salty because somebody sends me an email that says this was inappropriate or this was not correct. I don't know what that means. I could take that 1,000 ways. But if me and you are having a conversation and you can tell me that, then I can ask you, okay, so what should I have done better or what exactly? Then you can start breaking down that statement. So when you need to tell something to somebody that they need to hear, you need to say it in the again, breaking it down to the bones that is easiest for them to understand, but also understand that what they want to hear is not always going to align with what you want to say. But and again, what is more important? Them hearing what they want to hear and not fixing anything or changing anything versus you telling them what they need to know and making a quick change, course correct pivot to fixing it.
We could spend hours and hours and hours talking about communication. Um, uh, okay, another question just hit. What's a strategy when a client nods along in the conversation? Not What's a strategy when a client nods along in a sales conversation, but you can tell they're not actually getting the value? Is it the communication? So they're kind of
Yeah,
agreeing with
yeah,
you, but you
yeah,
don't really
yeah.
feel like they're engaged or listening.
I throw a question at them, whether it's a question that's a restatement of something I've already said or something that's going to make them think, because that will either wake them up or it'll expose completely that they're not paying attention to you. But when you engage them, because well, we can talk, I could talk for an hour if I just wanted to. But if I don't ask a question, if I don't throw something at somebody, yeah, I mean, my students all the time, they'll nod, they'll nod. So then I'll ask a question. I'll say, "Hey, so what about this?" And it forces them to answer the question. It forces them to think, and it shows me right then and there something I said 5 minutes ago. Were you actually paying attention? Were you listening, or were you just nodding your head because the teacher, the professor is looking at you, and that's kind of what you have to do to get along?
Think on the sales front too, that in many cases, when you're talking and that client's nodding, but you know they're not really engaged, in many cases, we're probably trying to sell our value before we really understand their need.
Yep.
If we're just yakking because we have something to sell, but we're not really focused on what their need is, then it doesn't matter how much value we think there is and what we're trying to say to them. What they haven't heard is that trigger that says, I expressed my need, or you didn't ask about my need, and this is a solution for that. I think a lot of times when people are checking out on us, or they're not paying attention, it's because we're not connecting. Communication's connection.
Mhm.
And how do we connect with them? My wife said to me the other night, she said, I asked you a question, and basically I asked you what time it was, and you told me how to fix a clock or how to build a clock. She said, I don't know how to build
Right,
the clock. I want you to tell me what time it is. So sometimes
right.
communication is about answering the question, and I'm bad about going around my elbow to get to my thumb. So I think how do we say more with less sometimes than just rambling in the communication process? Ryan, let me ask you this as we kind of put a bow on this.
Okay.
What what is the most important thing with improving communication out there? Is it listening? Is it saying more with less? Is it what is the thing with communication, whether it's in your family or in your business? Um, what would you say is the place that we all need to start?
I would say it's two things. One, obviously the listening and hearing. So not just listening for one ear out the other, but hearing what's being said. And two, relationship development. Because 9 times out of 10, now obviously you're not going to strike up a relationship with everybody you meet, but the ones who you know you're going to be having long-term relationships with, build relationships to where that communication becomes easier, where that communication becomes, I understand you. Like Derron, me and you have had enough conversations. I understand you. I understand your sensibilities. I know how to talk to you versus if we never really communicated. So create relationship driven communication and make sure you're listening and hearing what people are trying to tell you. And last one, just well, I'll throw this one in. Go in with the intention of not being transactional.
Yeah.
Do not be transactional. Go in trying to create the relationship driven communication. Steer away from transactional, except for when you're only in the transactional space, because that really you don't need it otherwise.
And I'll build off that to say um, communication's easier face to face. We think it's easy to hide behind the email or hide behind the text, but it's difficult to do what you just said, which is not be transactional. Text and email, you can't read tone; they do become transactional. Get face to face, talk to people, and then I would leave you with this: when you ask the question, here's the way I go about it, because I will tell you that listening intently with purpose is something that I know I have to work on. When I ask someone a question, I'm trying to be purposeful about acting like I'm listening. And then I'm
Right.
acknowledging to them through my eye contact, through my body language, that I am participating in that conversation. And then, especially on the sales side, you got to be prepared to articulate back to them what was being said. When you're focused on those things, ask the question, act like you're listening, acknowledge through your body language that you're participating, and then articulate back to them. It forces you to be in listening with intent. And I
Yep.
think when we listen and we hear, to your point, Ryan, we're going to have more success with communication, and there's going to be less issues that arrive um, because what I said or what I typed or what I sent is not what I meant. Um,
Right.
any final thoughts?
You always have to be willing to grow as a communicator, bar none. You could be, I've got a master's in communication. Doesn't mean I'm good at it. So I have to humble myself every time I have a conversation, every time I go into a circumstance, and I realize, hey, I missed a mark. So being willing to admit that we're all babies, we're all growing in communication, and communication changes. The way you communicated 5 years ago, 6 years ago, will change today. It'll change in 5 or 6 years. How do we adapt? So always think about adaptation. Think about being real with yourself and saying, "Hey, look, here are my deficiencies. Don't blame anybody
and
else. Blame my deficiencies."
and I'll go back to what you said in the very beginning. Many cases, miscommunication is missed communication. And
Yeah.
I just love that. Listen, check out Ryan's got so much content on 10 Minute Trainer Network. Make sure you go seek it out. Really good stuff. And honestly, I love the way he seems to be able to. You do a great job of kind of dumbing it down for us so we can understand. And I know I need that, and most of us do, especially as it relates to communication. So, Ryan, thank you very much. We will continue this conversation. And Brian, I know you're on there, but we will wrap this up. Thanks for everybody for being here.